Hey, Kelly, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing well. How are you?
We're great.
Yeah, glad to be talking with you today.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm excited to be here.
yeah. It's a little therapy in this quarantine time to be able to talk to other people and learn about them and do a little podcast. So we're excited about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Got to get as much personal interaction as you can these days, right?
For
Right.
sure.
And so for our listeners, we are on the phone with Kelly Stone. She is a doctor of physical therapy and a two-time CrossFit Games athlete. So, tell us a little bit about what got you into physical therapy.
Yeah, so I actually grew up always thinking that I was going to go to medical school. That was kind of always my plan. So while I was in completing my undergraduate degree in biology at the University of San Diego, I was spending time shadowing physicians and surgeons and kind of trying to figure out what I thought my niche might be. And I kind of just had this realization my junior year of college where I was so put off, honestly, by how detached a lot of physicians are. And that's nothing, negative about their profession, but I just felt like they didn't get to spend a lot of time with their patients, and there wasn't a lot of kind of really, good patient doctor interactions. And so I kind of just realized that maybe that wasn't the career path for me. Not to mention that I don't really love hospitals, so also was kind of a red flag. So I kind of started exploring different options and, kind of stumbled into physical therapy. I've always been an athlete my entire life and was actually very fortunate to be extremely healthy all throughout my years of sports. So I, funny enough, never had experience going to physical therapy, but it just seemed like it would be a good fit, something that would really kind of combine my interests in fitness and health, recovery, and moving into CrossFit as I've gotten older. And so I started shadowing different physical therapists and decided that that was the career that I wanted to pursue.
Yeah, it sounds like it meets a lot of those needs, the need or not the need or the interest to have connections and relationship building where you would miss out on that opportunity more so if you were, as you were mentioning, being at the hospital or being a doctor. But this way you get to use that knowledge of helping people and with fitness and health, and also be relationship building at the same time. So that's awesome.
Yeah, it's something, I'm a people person, and I really like to, whatever I'm doing, spend time being able to engage with people and really make a positive impact in their lives. And I think, one thing I've learned in my 4 years now as a physical therapist is that, your bond with somebody, regardless of their age, makes a really big difference in, their buy-in, how much they follow through with what you're telling them, and ultimately their results. Like, I've seen it firsthand numerous times. And, what's been really interesting for me is, and you may not know, but my actual main full-time job currently is actually in pediatrics. And that wasn't necessarily, the realm that I thought I was going to go into originally. But when I got out of school, I kind of got this good opportunity to join the largest home health pediatrics agency in Colorado. And I kind of jumped on it because I always thought, maybe at some point I'd want to do pediatric sports. And that's kind of a very small niche of PT. So I kind of thought if I could tackle pediatrics and I could tackle getting some orthopedics experience, that some point down the line I would be able to merge those two. So I've spent, much of the last 4 years working with families and kids in their homes to work on kind of functional goals, things that are very different than you would typically think of as physical therapy. And then I also spent most of last year working at an orthopedic practice, and just recently, a couple months ago, started my own small business doing more traditional orthopedic sports therapy out of my CrossFit gym. So I'm just trying to get kind of that varied experience, kind of get the opportunity to work with people of all ages, all abilities, all skill levels.
Well, you actually just hit the heart of Amy.
Yeah.
She's the director of a preschool.
Really?
Really
Yeah.
like a world-renowned preschool here that focuses on children playing. And so she's big into kids and movement.
Yeah, so I loved that you mentioned it doesn't matter what age they are to build relationships with, because to me that's the most important, that it's about building relationships with children so that they know that they can trust you. And I think that that's such an important piece too, with helping that buy-in for the physical stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been such a fun experience. I love kids because I am traditionally a very type A organized person, and you go into a pediatric setting, especially in home, and you just can't have that mindset. So I feel like it's really pushed me just as a person and as a therapist, to be able to say, okay, I'm going to walk in with a plan, and 9 times out of 10, it's not going to go that way. Like you've got to be able to adjust and be creative, and, you can't say, I want you to lay on your back and we're going to do glute bridges today, like to a 2-year-old, like that doesn't work. So you've got to be really creative and figure out how do you accomplish the goals that you want, while, making it fun and keeping them engaged, and a lot of my job is also, parent coaching and helping them help their children. So,
Absolutely.
It's been a really challenging, but super rewarding, job for me. I tell people I've had kids, that I maybe have seen since they were 5 or 6 weeks old. And, one particular child that I'm thinking of, he turned 3 and I was, I've been with him that entire time. So it's been amazing to see, some of those journeys over a long period of time, and to really feel like I'm part of their family, and, just to kind of see that progress is really, really awesome.
And I also, in my research, noticed that you work with some special needs children too. So the home health sector, it kind of falls into 2 buckets, I would say. So you have children that maybe are just not meeting motor milestones. So they could be, at younger ages, not sitting or crawling or walking at the time that we would expect. In later years, maybe they're not able to participate in, gym classes or kind of meet expectations, but there's nothing really significantly, that we can kind of pinpoint, just, like, oh, they're just a little bit behind, they need a little bit of extra support. But then the other large bucket of kids that I work with, is other children with special needs with specific diagnoses. So I do a lot of like Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, autism, spina bifida, a whole, slew of other diagnoses. And so that is a lot more function-based, like how can we maximize their ability to move and access their environment and home, and then progress that into other, kind of community aspects as well. That is really cool. And you should be very proud. That's just an
Thank
awesome
you.
story. And so,
Yeah.
so let's move to your background a little bit. I know that you were always an athlete in my research. Do you want to tell our listeners what you did growing up?
Yes, of course. So I grew up as a competitive gymnast and swimmer. I started gymnastics when I was 4 years old, and by about age 7 was training 4 to 5 hours a day. That was kind of my main sport growing up. I also started swimming competitively when I was around 6. And so those were my 2 primary focuses all the way through high school. And then I ended up swimming Division I for 4 years for the University of San Diego.
Well, Scott here was also a competitive swimmer.
I was.
Oh, really? That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, in high school, I competed at a very high level, and for a very short time was a Division I swimmer, but it just wasn't doing it for me like I. So basically, the story is I was a distance swimmer and an IMer, and then when I got to college, they went just distance, and I just was hating it.
I would hate it too. I never swim anything over a 200, so I understand. But honestly, I think what saved me the most as a collegiate swimmer is that I had never swam full time. So like something that I kind of really pride myself on is that, as a high school swimmer going into college, I had decided, I was just done with gymnastics. That had been my entire, childhood, up through high school. I, was a state champion, vault and balance beam competitor, and my high school won state twice as a team. And I just felt like I had done it. Like I, did what I wanted to do. I was ready to move on. But with swimming, I had never done it full time. It was kind of just always, most of the time I would just do it growing up in the summer, and then, did it a little bit more as I got older, but I was never your, 2 times a day practicer in high school or anything. So I kind of had to market
remember those
myself,
days.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just never did that, and people are always like, oh, you could be really good if you, actually put in more time. But I was just never willing to give up gymnastics. And I wanted to show that, hey, I can do both. But what that ultimately meant is that going into college, I really had to, market myself to coaches, because I was kind of on that borderline, like, yeah, you're not really fast enough for Division I. And I had honestly a lot of coaches that blew me off, saying just that. But I was fortunate to find a coach who was like, okay, like, I appreciate the fact that you have these times considering how little you've actually trained. And I'm going to give you a shot because I think you can make a lot of progress. So when I actually, went to college and just focused on swimming, like, I made huge strides, and continued to improve all 4 years. And I don't feel like I had that burnout that a lot of, swimmers that had been doing it for several years had. So I think it was a blessing in disguise for me personally.
And you were a butterflyer and a sprint freestyler?
Yes, that's correct.
That's cool. I actually started as a butterflyer when I first started swimming. It was my
Oh,
favorite
really?
stroke. And then as I advanced, I kept getting put into the 200, then the 500, then the 1650.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was a backstroker for quite a while too, but we ended up having a lot of backstrokers on my college team. So I kind of got pushed more towards butterfly and freestyle, which is fine.
So
Well,
I
was going to say, so before we start talking about how you got into CrossFit, I would love to hear about the belly flopping.
The belly flopping. Yes. So it's just a funny thing. I don't even know, honestly, the first time that it ever started, but it just has been kind of become my thing, where over the years, just recreational and actually like competitive belly flop contests, like, I've just been like, yeah, that's totally something I want to do. As a, child growing up, we would go to Mexico most summers, and the resort that we would go to would always have these contests every day. And so there were definitely a few, times where it would be like, oh, go do a belly flop, and whoever wins, you get like a free, slushy or something. And that was like all it took for me. Like, oh, it's a competition. Like, I'm totally doing this, so I perfected some like backflip belly flops and different, techniques. And then here in Colorado, we have a big water park called Waterworld. And so every summer they actually do like a pretty big production of a belly flop competition for like $1,000 if you win.
Wow.
And, they bring in this guy called Professor Splash, and he's like I think like a 20-time record holder in belly flop competitions. And so he comes and he's one of the judges, and there's actually like 4 or 5 judges. They broadcast it on the news, and, you dress up in this kind of, you pick a theme and you have a character. And so it's like a whole thing. So I did that for several years and, won a couple times. So it's just been one of those, like funny things, fun facts, things that I've done in my life.
Well, what's really funny is when I was researching you, your submission video for the Titan Games came up.
Oh, yeah?
And in that video, there is footage of your belly flopping, and it was outstanding.
Really? I appreciate that.
It was so fun to watch.
That's so funny. Thank you. Yeah, people think I'm crazy. Like I say it and they're like, what do you mean you're like a belly flop champion? I'm like, I mean, it's a thing. It's not like a full-blown sport, but it's definitely a thing, and there's definitely technique. So
I was actually in my basement office, and I was like, oh my God, she's doing a backflip.
Right? Yeah.
That was awesome. So one more question about your gymnastics career. We actually had Carrie Pierce on 2 weeks ago, and she talked about her gymnastics career and how at the age of 8, she had to make a decision as to whether she was going to go more hardcore, like Olympic style gymnast, or just stay kind of in the vein of college gymnast. Did you ever have to make that choice?
Yeah, I would say, I went to a very competitive gym. They put a lot of pressure on me and my family very early on to really commit to gymnastics. And, I got away with swimming a little on the side, but it was definitely frowned upon. We had all Russian and Romanian coaches. They were very strict. It was very structured, sessions, and there were definitely a lot of points where like you had to make sacrifices. Like in middle school, for example, I participated in a program where I would go to gymnastics in the morning for about 3.5 hours. Then our coaches would drive us to school. We would only do the 4 core classes and no electives. And then we would go back to practice for 3 or 4 hours. So, even just that, difference, for most of my schooling, I wasn't necessarily, following the same school schedule that a lot of my peers were. It also kind of carried into high school, where, I would say a lot of competitive gymnasts will end up homeschooling. And that was something that, me and my family didn't want to do. So I did go to a normal high school, but, we had an arrangement with our athletic director where like I never took any gym classes. My electives were very limited. And so I was done by about 12 every day. And then I would go to back-to-back practices for gymnastics and swimming. So it seemed normal to me, I guess, at the time. And that's just kind of all I ever knew. But, looking back, like it was definitely strange. And, I was definitely not the kid that was, playing with friends after school and kind of doing those types of things. It was like I was committed to gymnastics, and that's what I did for most of my childhood.
Yeah, she talks a lot about how insane the coaches and I'm putting words in her mouth, but how they would yell a lot and scream. And it actually formed how she became a coach because she didn't want to be that way.
Yeah, it's so interesting because, you think back on it, and especially when all of the, horrible stuff came out about, USA Gymnastics and, the scandals surrounding that, I really had to like kind of think back for myself and like, was there anything that I kind of went through that was, parallel that? And, from like a sexual abuse standpoint, absolutely not. But, there were some times where I guess I didn't really know any better, but, you were getting a lot of, very like harsh words. They really made you question, your body composition. And, I'm at a point in my life now where I'm very comfortable in my skin. It's taken me a long time to get here, but as a gymnast, I was always told you're too heavy. You need to be smaller. You're not the ideal size. And, I just would kind of brush it off and keep moving. But, like deep down, that was there. And,
deep down,
those
it's
words,
definitely...
they hurt. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but I will say like, I, had a lot of friends that I did gymnastics with that were, smaller and maybe the more ideal frame, but those were also people who tended to get hurt more often. And I was extremely healthy growing up. So I felt like I had a good balance of strength and flexibility, and was able to kind of, do what I wanted to do and compete at a high level. But, so there definitely was the negative side of it, but I also feel like that structure and discipline has totally shaped who I am as a person and has, allowed me to accomplish so many things in my life because I was so used to just structure and getting things done. And, if you're on a schedule where you get home at 7 p.m. and you've got to, finish everything and go to bed so you can get up and go back to practice, like you just learn structure and discipline in all aspects of your life. So I feel like that carried over, into my schooling and, allowed me to pursue a doctoral degree, relatively easily and, be a competitive, Division I swimmer while completing a science degree, which is not easy. So I don't look back on it as like a totally negative experience. I think there was a lot of negative as well as a lot of positive.
When you were also high school class valedictorian, correct?
Yes, I was.
so you're a pretty smart cookie.
If you were to ask me like, what is your like motto in life, or I don't know, like growing up, I hated the stigma that you could not be like strong and also smart. Like I didn't want to be seen as like, oh, you're just an athlete and you're just dumb as rocks. Like I was bound and determined to prove people wrong, and that's something that I've done, all throughout my academic career. Like I said, swam Division I in college. I was also a member of our honors program. I was the top female biology student in my major. Went into physical therapy school. I, graduated with a perfect 4.0 GPA and, top of my class, because it was just something, that I was driven to do and was super important to me, for whatever reason. A lot of it comes from my parents, but I've just been always a naturally driven person, I guess.
So I think you proved that you can be both smart and strong. That's for sure.
Yeah, you can check that box.
Right.
So what drew you to San Diego? Was it academically? Was it just a place you wanted to be?
So when I was looking, at schools, my first priority was I really wanted to be able to swim, so I started pursuing, options of, where that would be possible. But you may laugh at this, but my other driving motivation was to find a place where it was warm. So I love Colorado, but I am a warm weather person. So for me, I was if I'm going to be spending 4 or 5 hours in a pool every day, I want palm trees and warm weather. And so I sought out places that had palm trees and warm weather, and was fortunate enough to find a good coach and a team that would take me. And, I think San Diego is awesome because, I don't know if you know much about it, but USD, it's a small private school. It's a beautiful campus. It's very close to the water. So, I just looked at it as a good opportunity to kind of get out of my comfort zone, go somewhere new, live somewhere else for a couple of years. And I also liked the fact that it was a relatively small Division I school. So my class sizes were still, really small. I think my biggest class was maybe 50 people. So I knew all my professors. I could go to their office hours. And that was something that I was really looking for, just as a student. I didn't want to just be a number. I wanted to be able to engage and have professors that actually knew me as well.
And then you went clear across the country to Gainesville.
Yeah, my poor parents. Think I'm nuts. So yeah, it's funny because growing up, I was very shy. It's kind of hard to believe, I guess, at this point, but I was extremely shy and very, in my bubble. And so, stepping outside and I'm going to move to San Diego was a huge thing for me. And so then after I, was okay, I want to go to physical therapy school. So I essentially looked up the top 10 ranked programs for physical therapy and considered where are all the places I'd be willing to go. So I pretty much got down to USC and LA, which would have made logistically more sense, and then the University of Florida. But I ultimately decided to go to UF because it was going to be about $100,000 cheaper for me to do that.
That's pretty motivating.
So that was the driving force.
Yeah.
And then I thought it would be awesome. I love and appreciate sports of all levels, but to be able to go and be part of a university that is so huge in sports, especially my sports, gymnastics and swimming, as well as football, it was kind of that perfect world where I got to be in a small program of about 60 kids for PT school, but be part of a large university. It was such an amazing experience, and I'm, so grateful that I was able to do that.
Well, I actually lived in Tallahassee for 4 years, so we
didn't
like.
Don't tell me you're seminal. I'm chomping you through the screen.
I did not go to Florida State, and I'm not a Florida State fan. But while I lived there, I did go to some games and stuff. But and I was definitely well aware of the rivalry.
Right. Yeah.
And now I live in Columbus, so it's all Michigan, Ohio State here.
Yep.
Okay, I gotcha. Yep.
So you finished that. At what point did you quit? You didn't quit. You retired from swimming. And then I also read somewhere where you did bodybuilding for a very short time.
Yes. So, I'm sure a lot of athletes do, when I finished, I don't think I was upset when I finished gymnastics, but I knew that I was still competing, in college and swimming. So, I kind of avoided that, crisis mode of what do I do now? And so then at the end of college, I really had that, oh my gosh, what do I do? Yes, it was fun for a few months to not have to wake up early and, be on the pool deck at 5:30. But I was definitely, felt lost. What, this has always been my identity. I've always been an athlete. What am I going to do next? And so when I went to grad school, my roommate at the time had competed in some figure shows, which is a category of bodybuilding. And so she's one of my very best friends. And so we would go to the gym every day and, work out. And, somewhere down the line, we just decided like, hey, why don't we do a show together? And so, it's something that I had always kind of thought about it, but never, really taken it upon myself to do it. So we trained together. We did 2 shows, and it was a great learning experience and something I don't regret, but it was also so eye-opening to me as far as just realizing that it was absolutely not the sport for me. Like I, went through this period where I'm eating almost essentially no carbs, no fat, you're dieting like crazy, you're working out like crazy, all to stand on a stage and have people tell you what's wrong with you. It's like, it really is crazy, and I realize that people love it, and, if they do, more power to them. But for me, I just didn't get enough joy from it because I didn't feel like I had enough control over like ultimately how hard I worked didn't really matter, because I naturally have very big quads and legs, and it didn't matter what type of training I did. People are probably going to still tell me your legs are too big, like for the ideal body shape. And so I think I just, realized I'm like, okay, I need to find something else. Like this was a good try, but I want to find something where I feel like I'm going a little bit more back to my roots, and where the energy I put in really will carry over into like what I get out of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So did that experience sort of lead to your desire to want to then study nutrition?
Absolutely. So before that point, I really knew nothing about nutrition. I think back now, and, college was the smallest I ever was in my life weight wise, but I'm like, man, I probably could have made such better choices had I, actually known what I should be eating. But, learning, what can happen to your body when you totally deprive it of essentially everything, but then the repercussions of that, then, it really sparked a growing interest in nutrition for me. Something that I'm super thankful for, I did have a transition period when I was starting CrossFit after bodybuilding, where I felt like, it didn't matter what I, did, like I couldn't eat as much as I thought I needed to, and that people would tell me that I needed to be able to support the training that I was doing. But it was like my body just didn't know what to do with all that food. Like I had spent so much time in caloric restriction that, transitioning into high intensity exercise and all of these new energy requirements, my body was just like, what is going on? So, I'm thankful that I was able to work with a company and continue to still have a nutrition coach who, has gradually helped me, build up my ability to eat, primarily healthy foods, but eat to the point that supports the type of training and the level of competition that I want to be successful at.
And so what flipped you to CrossFit? How did that come along?
So this was funny. So I was doing a clinical rotation in Jacksonville, Florida, and the bodybuilding gym, this was kind of right after my show period. So I was still just kind of doing traditional bodybuilding training, and the gym that I was going to had a CrossFit gym attached to it. And so, I would walk by, and the CrossFit coach would, periodically just be like, hey, you should come work out. You should come work out. And, I think I had it in my mindset, like, I'm a physical therapy student and CrossFit is dangerous, blah, blah, blah. So I wasn't into it, but, finally one day he comes over and he goes, okay, I know you're not into it, but he was like, will you just try? I'm hosting this competition on Saturday. I will teach you all the movements that you need. Come try it out. If you absolutely hate it, I'll stop bugging you. But I think you'd have a really good shot to win, even though you've never done it. And so I'm looking at this guy like, I think you're absolutely crazy. But okay, you challenge me to anything, I'll probably do it. So, it's Friday night, the competition Saturday morning. He's like, here's a barbell. Here's what a clean is. Ready, go. So, working through that. And so went the next day, competed, and I ended up winning. And it was just kind of this light bulb moment of like, maybe he was right, like maybe all this time I've been fighting this off and this is actually where I'm supposed to be. So very quickly after that, I moved down to Fort Lauderdale for a clinical rotation, and there was a great CrossFit gym that was next to the hospital that I was at. I was like, okay, I'm just going to take the next 2 months and go work out there and see what happens. And I was just absolutely astounded by the community of people there and how much fun I had going to workouts and just the whole environment. And from that point forward, I've never looked back.
I think the one thing that we've learned in the last half hour with you is that call it a competition and challenge you, and you're gonna take a bite at it
and probably win.
Absolutely. Yeah. For example, today, offshoot story. Our gym owner posted a challenge to see who could do a Turkish getup with the most amount of toilet paper rolls packed up. So of course, I spent the first half of my workout trying to figure out how many toilet paper rolls I could stack up and do a Turkish getup. So we're at 7 currently. We haven't decided
7
who's winning it, but 7 rolls. But yes, I think you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah. So then you moved back to Denver, and was it for the job, or did you just want to be closer to family?
Yeah. So when I graduated, I just decided it was time to move back. I have a lot of student loans from graduate school, so my thought was
that
move
life.
back in, right? So still living that life, but move back in with your parents, not ideal, but in the long run, I just don't want to be, having these loom over my head forever. So I decided I'd move back. All my family's here, and I just intentionally started paying attention to gyms in the Colorado area and sought out one that specifically, was competing at a high level and also had good girls to train with, because I'm, one of those people where I don't necessarily want to be the best in the room. Like, I want to train with people that are better than me because I want to get better.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I ended up at CrossFit Omnia in Denver.
So you started CrossFit in 2015. Did you do the Open that year in 2015?
So I started at the very end of 2015.
Okay.
So I would not have done the Open. Yeah, because I was probably, I think, like November maybe of 15. And then I did do the Open in 2016. That was my first Open, and that was a couple months in. I remember I couldn't do a bar muscle up, and then I think they ended up in the Open that year, and I got them 2 weeks before. So that was super exciting. Yeah. But yeah.
And so then you did that Open, and then in 17 you actually joined. What's your CrossFit gym again?
CrossFit Omnia.
Omnia. Okay. And so you joined them in 17 and end up making the games.
Yeah. So when I, like I said, I picked Omnia because they had a great team and I had been following them. And so when I moved back to Denver, so I basically did my first Open in that February of 16. I graduated in April and then moved back to Denver in May after a Europe trip. So at that point, Omnia had qualified for their first regionals, and then they qualified for the very first time to go to the games. So, I kind of jumped in, right in the mix of all that. I actually flew out to California to watch them compete in 2016. And I set a goal right then and there. I said, I'm going to be on that team next year. And so I just put my head down and
competition.
Accepted.
Yep. Put my head down and trained really hard for that entire year. And our gym, for all 3 of those years, qualifying for the Open or qualifying for the games, we structured at our gym where it was based off of your performance in the Open. It was just a flat out top 3 girls, top 3 guys. So, I knew that I would have to earn my spot, but, challenge accepted. And, so that next year, 2017, I was our top performer at the gym, and we qualified back to regionals and then qualified for the second time, my first time, to go back to the games.
Well, 2017 is a special year for me because I worked the games in Madison.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I worked the outdoor venue, the North Park.
Okay.
Yeah. So I stacked those straw bales, whatever they were calling them.
Oh my gosh, that workout was awful.
Yeah.
It was fun, but it was awful.
we were stacking hay from 5 a.m. until 10:30 at night.
Oh gosh. Wow.
It was crazy.
I believe it. Those were high hay bales, and there were lots of them.
Dave Castro moved the position 3 times during that day.
Oh man. Yeah.
And so then,
Yeah, honestly, I mean, that year was so awesome. I was, I think we were fortunate because it was 5 returning members and me. We had a great coach who he still continues to coach me at this point, but it was a really special team for me because as far as I know, we had to be one of the only, if not the only teams at the games with 6 people that had legitimate full-time jobs.
wow.
And I think that is really unheard of, and I'm not even saying like, oh, people, that worked at the gym. Like we had a firefighter, we had, a sales manager, I was a physical therapist, like we had full-time jobs. So like realistically, we were only training together once a week, maybe, so the fact that we were able to kind of band together and place 13th at the games that year, like that's to this day one of like my most proud athletic moments, I will say.
And so then in 2018, you had an injury, right? And I think I read that you said you pushed through that to qualify for the games.
Yep. So 2018 was a rough year. Like I said, most of my life I was extremely healthy, like maybe an ankle sprain here or there, but nothing major. And right following the Open of 2018, we had qualified back to regionals. I had actually qualified individual, but gave up my spot to want to go back on the team. But right after that, I suffered a back injury. And the next like 3 or 4 months, I have such a renewed respect for people with, any type of injuries, but especially back injuries, because it was so mentally and physically exhausting for those like 4 months. Like I just felt like completely overwhelmed by it. Like I was so stressed out because I still wanted to compete and be there for my team. I didn't really know what was wrong with me. And that was frustrating. Like as a physical therapist and healthcare provider, I felt like I was, not listening to my PT brain that was saying you need to stop because you're in pain. But then I also had that, going head to head with my athlete brain that said, no, keep going. Your team needs you. So I spent a lot of that season leading up to regionals really not doing much of anything. Like I would do bare minimum team training, really trying to avoid pain whenever possible. Lots of tears, lots of pain. And, when it came down to regionals, we had a very frank conversation the week before where, it was kind of like, all right, guys, we have an alternate. We can choose to put her in. And if that's your choice, I totally get it. If you choose to put me in, you've got to realize that there's probably a 50-50 chance that I won't be able to finish, and like once we sign me in, that's it. So they decided that they wanted to have me try. So, we pushed through and I was able to compete, and somehow miraculously, like we needed to beat one team in the very last event. And it came down to like, the very last, it was like a worm walking lunge, and they were ahead of us, and we made one mistake and had to drop, and we just barely passed them. I mean, it was like, straight out of a movie, but somehow ended up being able to qualify again. And that was super exciting, but then also simultaneously my brain's going like, oh my gosh, now you've got to keep training, so I think I took the next 3 weeks completely off, was still having pain. And, just at that point decided, okay, I'm committing to doing the games. If I'm still having pain after, I'm going to stop. But from now and then, I'm going to do everything I possibly can to get better. So, I didn't pull from the ground. I didn't do any Olympic lifting. I was going to a physical therapist twice a week, a sports chiropractor twice a week. I was doing cryotherapy. I was doing CBDs, like anything, everything. Ultimately decided to get an MRI. And I think that was huge for me because it showed like, I think I had some minor bulging discs, but there was nothing that was like, you are risking permanently damaging your back. Right. And so somehow in that whole mix of things, I slowly started to get better. But going into the games that year, I felt so unprepared, like I didn't feel like I was able to do the training that I wanted to be able to do. But we were like, all right, we're going to do the best we can. And then the whole irony of the whole situation was I ended up being okay at the games in 18, but my teammate Sarah fell from the ropes, or she dropped down onto the crash mat during the obstacle course event, and ended up fracturing her ankle. So we had to withdraw.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. My stomach flips just thinking about that.
18 was a whirlwind.
Well, Scott and I both being 40 over for me, 50 over for him. We both know a little something and have been there before with our own back injuries, and same kind of thing. Like, it's one of those things where like the pain is so terrible, and it feels like anything that you are doing is something that's going to really harm you, and have it be something that is, I don't want to say minor, but something that is not, life ending, right? But it feels so terrible. Absolutely. It feels like that's what's happening.
And the worst part for us right now,
and it
is that,
and it's so interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, the worst part for us during the quarantine are the guy who does the therapy on our back is not available during the quarantine, so we're stuck without it.
Right, you're like, oh no. But so it's interesting because, as a student in a physical therapy school, one of the things that we talked a lot about was pain science and the psychology of pain, and how, if you're fearful of something, being a big impact, on your life for a really long time, that we call it pain catastrophizing, can actually factor in and upregulate your pain, like chemicals in your body, and make your perception of pain worse. So, and that happens a lot in the case of low back pain, because for whatever reason, we tend to associate a lot more anxiety and long-term disability with back pain versus just saying like, oh, my elbow hurts. Like, most people realize, oh, okay, like it's just going to get better. It's annoying now, but it'll get better. But for some reason, spine injuries seem to hold a higher value. And looking back, I think I was totally in that, and I just couldn't pull myself out of it. Like, I just kept thinking like, no, there has to be something seriously wrong. How could I possibly be in this much pain? So who knows how much that, catastrophizing I was doing, plus the stress of, competing and having 5 people staring at me like, why can't you train normally? And it was just that whole mix of emotions and everything. I'm sure, my stress and cortisol levels were through the roof for like 4 months straight, which wasn't helping me recover also. So I don't know what ultimately helps me get better, but one large takeaway was that I learned, with the help of my awesome coach, like how to learn how to use my core correctly in a more CrossFit specific sense. Like, I was always, set on, I know how to use my core because I was a gymnast. And yes, I was very good at using it in static positions and in hollowed body positions that we used, but that didn't necessarily carry over into, pulling a heavy bar from the ground or doing clean. That's an extension movement. That's completely different. And I learned that I couldn't do it at all. And that was like, a tough pill to swallow. I'm like, oh, I'm a PT and was a gymnast for 14 years. Like, how can I not have a strong core? But it was like, all right, well, if you want to prevent this from happening again and you want to get better, like, you better start addressing it. So we had to kind of start from ground zero after the games and work on building that up. And I've come a long way since, and I'm super thankful for that.
Yeah, and we can empathize with that a lot. So my question now is, what is a hard question to ask, but because the season has been turned upside down now, but what were your goals going into the season this year?
Yeah, so I honestly wasn't sure if I was going to do the Open until about 2 weeks before. But once I kind of got in and committed to doing it, I decided, I was hoping to be top 100 in the Open. I was hoping to compete at least 3 sanctioned events, at least 2 of those being individual, and definitely, had my sights set on hopefully winning, or getting a game spot. I've kind of realized that, it might be a year or 2 out, but if you don't start thinking that way now, like, and you don't confidently believe that you can accomplish that, I don't want to set myself up for failure having that mindset. So I think I surprised myself placing 60th in the Open. especially not really, fully intending to do it and not really, preparing specifically for that. So I was proud of kind of that. But I was originally planning, I did Wadapalooza as a team, and then I had qualified to compete at the Mid-Atlantic CrossFit Challenge and also Asbury Park, and not really sure if either of those are going to happen at this point.
Yeah. So we saw you compete at Wadapalooza on the Sugar Wad team, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And you guys took 7th?
Yeah. And that was honestly, I was a little nervous to be on that team. They had approached me, to kind of be on this team. Lissa, the other female, we train at the same gym and we've competed together. So that was, fine. But the two guys were new. And also one of them lives in Texas. So I think I still had my kind of back injury in the back of my head. Like, I don't know if I want to commit to being on a team. Like, I don't know if I want to commit to moving a worm with people that I haven't trained with before. But, we kind of talked about it. We trained together a couple times, decided to do it. And overall, I think we did really awesome that weekend for a team that's only trained together twice. So, definitely we'll see what kind of happens, obviously, with the season, but could potentially look to compete with them again. We definitely had a few kind of major weaknesses, major week events. But we also had 4 top 4 finishes and a 3rd place finish in event 1. So that was really kind of eye-opening, like, hey, we can actually hang, with people. And, I think we, in the future could potentially vie for one of those team spots. So
yeah, that 3rd place finish is actually how I got to find you on Instagram because.
Oh, really?
Because Sugar Water is right up there with the big guys. And I was like, well, who are these people? So I started looking you guys up to see who the makeup of the team was. And that's when I started following you on Instagram just to kind of see who this team was. And you guys made a splash right off the get-go.
Right. Yeah, it's funny because, so I've competed at Wadapalooza. This is my 4th year. The last 3 years I've been on all teams of 3 females. And it's like every year I feel like people like don't know who we are. And obviously this was a different team this year, but even the last couple of years, like we would have really awesome events, a couple of years, we're top in swim events and other things. And people are always like, who is this team from Colorado? So I keep hoping that one of these years people actually know who we are. But yeah, it was awesome to go out there and have some, really awesome events. Event 1, I am not a runner. So that was a huge win for me that I was able to kind of keep up and not drop the ball in that first event. Also, volume ring muscle ups are not my thing. So all things considered, that was a great event for us. And then our other, top 4 finishes, were a lot of team-based events. So the fact that we were able to kind of naturally just, come together and perform well in those was super awesome as well.
So I kind of want to finish up with your social media presence. You are very inspirational in your posts on Instagram, and you have quite a following. So that's really cool. You actually did a post today that I thought was so perfect for what we're going through with the quarantine issue across the country. Would you mind sharing that with the audience?
Yeah. So, my post today was essentially, I think I said new day, new month, same goals. And I kind of go on to talk about how, the difference between those who succeed in reaching their goals and those that fail or how they respond when things get tough. Like it's easy to follow through with things when everything's set up perfectly and things are going well. But ultimately, those who actually reach their goals are ones that push through when things are hard and when things aren't ideal. So, obviously, like, do you miss your gym? Yeah, I totally miss my gym. Like, I know we're all feeling that. Like, do I love to work hard, doing my workouts at home by myself? No, I don't. But I'm still doing them and I'm still setting goals and, making sure that I'm following through with, things and priorities that I've set for myself because, I'm thinking, where do I want to be when all of this is over? Like, we can sit and, have a pity party and say, like, I'm just going to eat crap and I'm not going to work out and this sucks and, let's just watch Netflix all day. But, in 3 months down the line, like, how are you going to feel? Like, are you going to look back and say, hey, I really wasted that time. I don't really feel very good. What was I doing? My guess is probably, yeah, if that's your decision. Or the other option is to say, hey, this isn't perfect. Yeah, this sucks, but I'm going to make the best of it. I'm going to keep moving forward. I'm going to get my workouts in. I'm going to eat the best that I can, and I'm going to keep moving forward. And, regardless of what happens with, CrossFit season, the whole state of the world, I can, get to the end of my days and say, like, hey, I feel really good about the workout that I did today. I felt really good about the food that I put in my body, the water that I drank, the sleep that I got. And I know I'm not going to look back and have regrets about this time.
And I think, like, after the last 45 minutes we spent with you, you're the perfect person to send that message. When you're faced with a challenge, you take it on head on and you're going to do it the best of your ability.
Yep.
And so I think it's great that you put that message out there, and I'm so glad you shared that with our audience. How can they find you on Instagram?
Yeah, so my handle is Kellstone35, KELLSTONE 35.
And you also are putting out at-home workouts, and I thought the one the other day when you showed how to do a whole workout using your stairs was really cool.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so it's been a funny kind of adjustment for me because I really have made an effort to kind of grow my social media presence, for not only the opportunities that it's given me for sponsorships and things like that, but also because I'm passionate about helping people from any walks of life. Nutrition, something I'm really passionate about. Exercise, I'm really passionate about. Recovery, rehab, those things I'm really passionate about. So it just seems in this day and age like it's a good platform to be able to help a lot of people. And especially in, this time frame where everyone's stuck at home, I kind of looked at it as like, hey, this is another opportunity to, not only do I have more time at my disposal, but there's a lot of people that are sitting around all day with nothing else to do but look at their phone. So, I've tried to, whereas before I would probably only just show like, here's what my workouts are. I've been trying to provide some more opportunities, for people to say like, hey, like you may not be able to do or have access to the equipment to do the stuff, at this level, but like, that doesn't mean that you can't take parts of it and still make it interesting and fun and challenging based on what you have and what your skill level is, so yeah, like I made a workout that was literally just using my stairs the other day. Last weekend I did an exercise or a whole sequence. This post probably took me like 2 hours, which is totally ridiculous because I'm like not a media person, but like it was like 34 exercises you can do with one kettlebell. Wow. And you can mix and match and do everything you want. But here are 34 different things. I could probably come up with 25 different workouts, using that. But yeah, just to try to give some people some new and creative ideas to keep it interesting, because that's ultimately how you're going to stick with it. If you're doing the same thing every day, it's going to get boring. But if you can switch it up and get new ideas, hopefully you'll be motivated to keep moving.
Well, you said just a minute ago that you hope next time you're at Wodapalooza, people know who you are without having to look you up. And with your work ethic and your track record, I am sure that people are going to know who you are in the very near future. And we want to thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Yeah, it was great getting to talk to you and getting to know about you and hearing about your life outside of CrossFit as well. So thanks for being on.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me and letting me rant about things in my life. But I really appreciate it. And I always love to connect with new people and, hopefully motivate and inspire some people to make some positive changes in their life.
Well, thank you. And we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Sounds great.
All right.